Hi everyone, I'm Jake,
And I'm Caroline,
and we're the co-presidents of GSA.
and this is our presentation on LGBT history, which is going to touch on a lot of the stuff that your regular history class does not teach you. So where does LGBT history begin? So there's not necessarily a point in time where LGBT history begins, as a lot of its members have always been here, whether they were out or not. We are going to be focusing specifically on the LGBT movement within the United States today. So that began in the early 1900s. Although the term LGBT wasn't used by the community until 1988, the movement was very much thriving. It's a common misconception that the movement began at the time of the Stonewall Riots. It actually began on a movement in the streets of Los Angeles.
So it all begins in 1924 with the Society for Human Rights. This organization was founded by Henry Gerber, and it was the first documented gay rights organization within the United States of America. The Society for Human Rights published a few issues of the newsletter Friendship and Freedom, which was the United States' first gay newsletter. However, due to police raids, the organization was forced to disband in 1925. The Pink Triangle. World War II marks the introduction of the infamous Pink Triangle seen throughout the LGBTQ+ movement. It was branded on gay men in concentration camps. To make matters worse, this same Pink Triangle was branded onto sexual abusers as well, creating the trope that gay men are known as predators.
Okay, so the Manikin Society began in 1951. It was founded by Harry Hay, and it's one of the nation's first big gay rights groups. It actually did not use the term homosexual because they thought that focused more on sexual acts and it was more clinical. Instead, they used the term homophile. Unfortunately, Harry Hay was kicked out of this organization, however, due to his views on communism. Our next thing is One Inc., which is the first USA LGBT+ publication, and it was openly sold on the streets of Los Angeles. It had LGBT rights and information to promote LGBT rights. However, it actually sued the US Post Office Department due to its refusal to deliver, which resulted in One Inc. versus Olsen, which we'll discuss a little later.
So next is the Daughters of Belitis. In 1955, the organization of the first lesbian organization within the United States was formed. This organization was named after a character in a poem titled Songs of Belitis, a female character who was in a romantic relationship with a Greek lyric poet. The group met in secret social clubs and bars for lesbians to meet. This caused these places to become huge targets for police raids. So the Daughters of Belitis fluctuated between an LGBTQ+ organization and a purely lesbian group. Next is One Inc. v. Olsen, 1958, which was the court case that we were talking about before. In this court case, the One Inc. LGBTQ+ publication sued the United States Postal Service after it refused to send One Inc.'s publication around the country. This is the first United States Supreme Court that ruled in favor of the LGBTQ+ community. It reversed a lower court's ruling that declared the publication had disobeyed obscenity laws.
Okay, so the first documentary about homosexuality happened in 1961, and it was called The Reject. It wished to analyze and answer certain questions about homosexuality. Unfortunately, it was actually a very homophobic film, as it addressed homosexuality as an illness and more of a problem, and it actually attempted to find a cure of homosexuality. Okay, so the Stonewall Riots, which many of you might be familiar with, it took place between June 28th and July 1st of 1969, and it was a series of demonstrations against the police raid of the Stonewall Inn. The Stonewall Inn was a haven for LGBT+ members during the heavy times of discrimination, and it was led by street activists Sylvia Rivera and Marsha P. Johnson, who are shown in this picture, who are two trans women of color.
In 1970, there was Christopher Street Liberation Day, a march that commemorates the first anniversary of the Stonewall Riots. In this march, LGBTQ+ members and allies walked through the streets of New York City, and it was known to be the origination of the first Pride Parade. In 1973, Lambda Legal formed. This was the first legal organization that was established to fight for the equal rights of the LGBTQ+ community. Lambda Legal also focuses on those with HIV and AIDS the AIDS epidemic. In this organization, men and women alike were represented equally within the workspace, so it's actually one of the first organizations to include true gender equality. As well as taking legal action, Lambda Legal issues their causes through education and public work projects.
Okay, so in 1973, homosexuality was no longer declared a mental illness. The American Psychiatric Association, the largest psychiatric organization in the world, removed homosexuality from the list of mental illnesses, quoting, "We will no longer insist on a label of sickness for individuals who insist that they are well and demonstrate no generalized impairment in social effectiveness." Okay, so then in 1978, the first LGBT plus pride flag was created by Gilbert Baker. It had wished to make the flag as visible as possible due to wanting to show everyone who they truly were. And it urged to create the symbol of the LGBT plus community by Harvey Milk, who was the first openly gay elected official.
Next was the first National Lesbian and Gay Rights March, which occurred in 1979. This was a march on Washington for LGBTQ plus rights, and in the process, it gained over 75,000 participants. This march was the first national march for LGBTQ plus rights in American history. In 1983, there was a Supreme Court case, People v. West 12 Tenants Corporation. This court case ruled in favor of the LGBTQ plus community, and it was supported by Lambda Legal, the organization that we talked about before. In this case, Dr. Joseph Sonnabend and many other doctors were fired or evicted from their offices because they helped and treated gay men who had HIV or AIDS. This workplace discrimination was ruled to have violated the New York Human Civil Rights Law and the civil rights law under this Supreme Court case.
Okay, so the Hate Crime Sentencing Enhancement Act took place in 1995, and it was put in effect alongside the Violent Crime Control and Law Enforcement Act. This act allowed a judge to provide a harsher sentence if the victim was attacked or targeted because of their sexuality, and it also required the authorities to take and provide statistics on these hate crimes. Okay, so a specific hate crime is the shooting at the Backstreet Cafe. This took place in Virginia, in which a man in a trench coat walked into a gay bar and opened fire, killing 1 and wounding 6. The shooter had asked another man on the street how to get to the gay bar and even showed him his gun, but because of lack of awareness surrounding the LGBTQ plus hate crimes, the man passed it off as a joke and pointed him in the right direction. This shooter received multiple life sentences for this crime.
The 2003 Supreme Court case, Lawrence v. Texas, rules in favor of the LGBTQ plus community. American laws that prohibited private homosexual activity between 2 consenting adults were finally ruled to be unconstitutional. In 2004, the first state legalized same-sex marriage. On May 17, 2004, Massachusetts became the first state to officially legalize same-sex marriage for the first time. It deemed denying marriage rights to 2 people of the same sex as unconstitutional and therefore illegal.
Okay, so the Matthew Shepard and James Byrd Act was passed in 2009. Matthew Shepard was a gay college kid who was brutally killed in Wyoming in 1998, and James Byrd Jr. was a Black man who was killed violently by white supremacists also in 1998. This act is in memory of those 2 innocent victims, and it provides more state and local funding to better investigate and prosecute hate crimes. It also criminalizes harming someone else based on the basis of actual or perceived race, gender, disability, national origin. It's broader than previous hate crimes, previous laws against hate crimes, as mentioned before. In 2015, the military opened equal opportunity to LGBT plus members. Sexual orientation was finally added to the military's non-discrimination list, quoting, "Discrimination has no place in America's armed forces." This gives troops protection against discrimination and equal employment paths and services, no matter how they identify.
The legalization of same-sex marriage finally occurred in 2015. On June 6, 2015, in the Supreme Court case Obergefell v. Hodge, the Supreme Court held in a 5-4 decision that the 14th Amendment requires all states to grant same-sex marriages and recognize same-sex marriages granted in other states as well. The next year, in 2016, the Orlando Pulse nightclub shooting occurred. In this shooting, a gunman opened fire at the Pulse nightclub in Orlando, Florida, killing 49 people and injuring dozens of others. This was the deadliest mass shooting in recent US history, that is, before the Las Vegas shooting in 2017. After the attack, gun sales actually went up, and four gun control legislations in Congress failed to pass.
Okay, so we have the trans military ban, and fortunately it was repealed. So on March 23rd, 2018, former President Donald Trump banned all transgender people from serving in the military. And then on January 22nd, 2019, the US Supreme Court allowed Trump's discriminatory statute to be put in place. While running for president, Democrat Joe Biden promised that he would repeal this military ban on day one of his presidency if he were elected. Unfortunately, on January 25th, 2021, current President Joe Biden lifted Donald Trump's transgender military ban, allowing all transgender people to now serve. Okay, so protection from employment discrimination took place in the case Bostock versus Clayton County. On June 15th, 2020, the Supreme Court, in a landmark 6-3 decision, outlawed LGBTQ plus workplace discrimination. The decision rules that Title VII of the Civil Rights Act protects LGBTQ plus individuals from workplace and employment discrimination.
President Biden's new executive order. On January 20th, 2021, President Biden was sworn into office. On his first day, he signed an executive order passing, quote, the most far-reaching federal protections of LGBTQ plus individuals, according to NPR. This executive order builds off of Bostock v. Clayton County, like we talked about before, and interprets that this Supreme Court decision also protects LGBTQ plus individuals in the regions of education, housing, and healthcare. This combats LGBTQ plus discrimination in many forms of daily life. So is this the end of LGBTQ plus history? This is definitely not the end of LGBTQ plus history. Members in the community are still fighting for the right to be treated and respected just as the rest of the nation are, and our rights aren't guaranteed nearly everywhere, and there is still a lot of work to be done. Thanks for watching.
Thank you so much for watching, everyone.